Hello, everybody. My name is Dude BDR. Welcome to TekTox. Today, we're going to talk to you about some D&D. I've got a couple of D&D absolute experts here in Redneck Alcatraz and Atrocity. Then I got some. Actually, Chris, do you play
Every
D&D
week,
on the regular?
I'll be doing D&D right after we're done with
He
this
plays a
podcast.
lot more frequent than I do.
Every Saturday.
Oh, okay. So our two experts here are going to be Wolf, Chris, and Redneck Alcatraz. And then our frequenter will be Atrocity, Phil. And then we'll have Apocalyptic and DJ Costin, who have played a couple times. And then there's me. I've not played at all. I don't know shit about it. So mostly my input is going to be questions. But yeah, that's our list of casts for today. And let's just jump right on into it and let us have it there, Redneck. What do you got for us?
Well, we're going to start this off fairly simple with a basic question of what is D&D? Short answer,
Fair.
D&D translates to Dungeons & Dragons. It's a fantasy-based tabletop role-playing game that has been around for over 40 years, and its creation and popularity have then splintered off to create pretty much most every modern role-playing game can trace its roots back to Dungeons & Dragons. If you've ever played like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, Final Fantasy, World of Warcraft, all of these have origins that trace back to the basics of Dungeons & Dragons. I mean,
Might and Magic.
Might and Magic, RuneScape, Ultima.
Now,
Think
RuneScape.
Ultima-
I've played old school RuneScape before. So
Yeah,
that's,
remember you
that's
gathered equipment,
based-
you adventured around, found stuff, gathered gear, built your gear, and had various stats.
okay.
Yeah, that
D&D is
kind of was started by that.
kind of the origin of the group of people go out, get quests, do a thing, get experience, come back, get rewards. That's kind of like the essence of D&D, and a lot of games play off of that.
So D&D is like quest based.
Pretty much, mostly, yes.
It's story based. So,
And the dungeon master writes the story.
correct.
Oh.
So the
Oh.
term game master applies to the one who runs the game. D&D specifically typically refers to the game master as the dungeon master, the DM. But they are kind of a narrator and guide, not so much of, all right, this is happening.
They pretty much
doing
bring the
this.
structure of the game itself that you're playing with the group, while the players provide everything within, because it's an active writing book.
The way I
You
describe
never know what's going to happen, but it's all going to be guided through the structure that the DM provides.
D&D to people who've never played it before is I ask them, have you watched Lord of the Rings? It's basically you're playing Legolas and Gimli and Frodo, and J.R.R. Tolkien is the DM. Except you, the player, have the power to make shit decisions and screw everything up. And the DM has to write it in such a way that either you get consequences or he has to railroad it back to doing the main quest.
Also, you have the hilarity that ensues, like the part at the... I haven't watched Lord of the Rings in a long time, but basically where he turns and says, "Toss me! I can't make it my own!" Don't tell the elf.
All right.
Or
so
the
let me
scene
see
in the
if
middle
I
of the battle.
can.
Yeah,
It only
moment. I
counts
can
as
frame
one!
Let me see if I can frame this. So basically, what you have, what the bare bones of the game, you have your dungeon master, which is your narrator or game runner, referee, in a way that would basically outline your story and your goal and what you're trying to get to this point, and that's the dungeon master. They've framed it and they put all this into it, and then the characters, the players who play the characters, then attempt to live out this story using their own imaginations and going through it in whatever way. And the dungeon master has different points in the story that when they get there, there's a different problem or quest presented to them that they then have to solve or go through.
Or the party starts a problem and now they have to figure out how to get themselves out of it.
Okay.
There's different kinds of DMs. Some of them like more theater of the mind. So you're not going to be playing by the book so much. It's if you have a good idea, you say, "Oh, my character wants
By
to
the
find a
book.
pebble on the ground and throw it and do something with it." You've got some that are very by the book. They want to do everything by the rules, how the numbers work, and you have some people who are more.
There are
focused on-
set rules for the
Yeah. Oh yeah.
for the
Oh,
game in
yes.
general.
There's
Okay.
there's novels for it, like college-sized books. There's only 3 that are like the essential reads, but there's many expansions and
Now these I've heard of. There's what the player's guide, the dungeon
He'll show
master's
ya.
guide, and a monster's guide.
yeah, that's
Player's
that's
handbook.
Three
Okay,
This
basic.
is
Player's
for
handbook, okay.
3.5. You have the Dungeon Master's Guide, which
Okay.
is general rules, guides, and information on the world and how to set up your own.
Okay.
And then the Monster Manual,
The monster-
which is the
okay.
creatures of the world. The monstrous creatures of the world.
So you don't have
Now,
to use
can
those.
you add or take away monsters?
Yeah, you can.
Oh,
you
yeah,
can make whatever
there's-
monster
Okay.
you want.
For
Yeah,
the
like
game 3.5,
you can
in
you
the
can
base,
pick and choose what you want to
system
add to the
alone.
game.
there's
So
5
the game
monster
is
manuals.
essentially wide open fantasy, and
Oh, yeah.
the limits
It's-
are your
it-
own imagination, but you
The
do
It's a
DM
true
have
open world.
The DM is
certain
Gary's mod.
rules to follow.
That's pretty much what it is.
Okay.
You got some
That-
DMs. You got
that
some
actually
DMs
makes
who will
some good
focus
sense.
on. Some DMs will focus on combat, and it'll just
Okay.
be one fight to the next fight to the next fight. And
As it's
they're
referred
gonna,
to, kind of a hack and slash game.
yeah, they're
Now,
going
like,
to be more
combat
focused on the
Do they have
monster
certain
manual.
certain rules that do the players have certain rules that they have to follow regardless of like their strength and power and abilities and stuff?
Yes.
Okay, and like what are those?
It's basically like an RTS. Each turn of the individual
That's
you have
real-time strategy game.
yes,
I think you mean
or a
TBS.
turn-based game. On your character's turn, you have X amount of actions you can possibly do, and then you choose how you want to move, what you want to do, what special actions you want to trigger, if any.
So you could have like
And-
a preparation phase, action phase, defensive phase, or withdraw phase.
Well,
ending
except
phase.
typically on your turn, you have kind of your action or standard action, which is I'm going to attack. I am going to do
like
this.
playing Risk. I don't know if you've ever
Yeah,
played
and
Risk.
then
Yeah,
you can
that's
move,
crazy.
and then you may have a special action. You don't have to do these in a specific order on your turn. It's you have these actions you can do. What order you do it, which ones you do, is entirely up to you and what is viable.
There's typically 3. I know Pathfinder is an offshoot of D&D. It's very similar. They give you a blanket 3 actions. In D&D, typically you can move once, you can act once, and if you're a high enough level, maybe you can act more than once. Like you've got more than one physical attack in a round because you're strong enough or fast enough. In Pathfinder, which is very similar, you get 3 actions. You can do anything with those 3 actions. You can move 3 times. You can attack 3 times with penalties. Typically in D&D, I think some rules state you can only move before an action, not after. But
In D&D, your movement, your action can be at any point, but you cannot split your movement. Like you can't move, attack, and move unless you have something that grants you an exception.
Like a rogue can do that.
If they have the proper, well, it varies from edition to edition, because as D&D has advanced over the years, the rules have changed slightly. In older editions, there were the exceptions of being able to move, attack, move are very, very, very few. In later editions, like 5th edition, the most recent one, that rule was thrown out the window. You can move, attack, do whatever, continue to move. there is no restriction on that, really. So it depends on what edition, and then, like you mentioned with Pathfinder, there's a lot of offshoots because D&D for decades actively endorsed other people using their game system and to make their own versions and their own content. That's how Pathfinder was created, and a bunch of other options of games and styles.
Like our current campaign, I've been playing D&D with the same group for 3 years now, and we played D&D 3.5. We played a round of D&D 5. We played Pathfinder, and we played Starfinder. And currently, we've finished 4 different campaigns. Right now, we're doing a homebrew where we've got characters from all 4 of those in the same world, and it's kind of a mishmash world. Like, not to take too much time, but what's that? I don't know the name of the movie. Some old animation movie where at the end they made a new planet from a giant spaceship, activated something, and it created a new world. Atlas?
I don't remember.
Titan
Titan
AE.
AE. Titan AE.
Titan AE.
That's
Yes.
why I was like looking at you,
Yes.
Chris. I was like, Titan AE?
Our last campaign ended like Titan AE, and we created a new planet. So with that world, there's people from space. There's people who've never been to space who were born on this new planet, who are like the normal D&D rogue and archer. And we also have some space people, and all of that's tied into the same world. So the rules aren't everything. It's all up to the group and what is fun.
All right, so I do want to get into in just a minute the like different versions that you just mentioned, the like 3.5, 4, 5, Pathfinder, all that. But before I forget, so with each phase of a player's turn, and I think this is probably where this comes in. Probably one of the most iconic portions of D&D is the dice, right? So during a player's turn, these different phases, they include the dice, correct? And you have different things that you have to roll different kinds of dice for. Like
They can.
what I've seen, there's the pyramid dice. It looks like it's the D4, has 4 sides. Standard dice with 6 sides, a D8, a 10, 12, and a 20. And so I understand that there's many other kinds of dice that you can have. But what are these general dice normally used for, and like what situations would you roll a 20 or a 4 or an 8?
It very much depends on what you're trying to do, involving things like if you're casting some sort of magic of some kind, you could be using any of those dice types or multiple in combination. Generally, the D20, the 20-sided, is typically used for pretty much everything when you're making an attempt to do something, assuming the DM actually requires it. Sometimes, like, walk down the street. You don't have to make a check to walk down the street. You just do so. I want to go for a run. Okay, you go for a run. Sometimes, as Chris mentioned, for Theater of the Mind, it's a lot more how creative are you and less dice roll required. Some DMs require dice rolls for everything. Some is just what rules say you have to do. And if you're creative, okay, go for it.
I think for most of the smaller dice, like the D4 and the D6, most of those are typically used for damage, especially at
Combat.
low levels. Yeah, combat. So if I'm a rogue and I've got a nice dagger, my damage might be 1d6 plus a number. And if it's got poison on it, maybe it's 1d6 plus 1d4 poison. So I'll roll 1d6 for my dagger damage and 1d4 to add my poison damage, and there's that. The d20 is used for like any utility actions, like I want to hide, I want to perceive something, I want to roll a medicine check to see if I can heal poison on my teammate, I want to pick this lock. All of those usually require a d20 because it's 5% chance per number.
Okay.
So, different dice depending on what you're doing.
Okay. So let me see if I get this right. D20 is nearly universal. You can use it for just about any kind of action.
Well,
Just
where smaller dice-
It's a yes and no on that one. It's more like whether or not you can or cannot or be able to do whatever you want to do.
Well, whether the outcome can have a varying state of effect.
Yeah. Depending on what edition you're playing or the DM you're running, you can have ultimate successes, crit successes, successes, fails, and ultimate failures.
Like
Okay.
you like every once a day for a whole week, like 7 days, you go up to a door, you open the door, you say you want to open the door, you open the door, it's fine. Like one of those days out of nowhere it just becomes locked, and you're like, oh, okay, well, can I try to open it? Well, it's locked. Well, I got a lock picking kit here. Well, okay, well, what do you want to do with it? I want to lock pick the door and open it. Cool, roll your d20. And varying on what that d20 gives you, whether it's a successful number, you unlock the door. If it's an unsuccessful roll, then based on the DM's discretion, something will cause you not to open that door. Whether it be you suck at lock picking or you break your lock picks in the door and you jam it, it varies.
Somebody kicks the door open and smashes your nose in.
Yeah, somebody inside opens the door outward and smashes your face. Something.
There's behind the
and then
scenes-
smaller dice, like the 4 and the 6, are more common for like attack and defense things, where you would determine what kind of damage you're doing or what kind of damage you're blocking.
The 6 is probably the most common dice used in the game outside of the D20.
So you got like a little Pokemon dice here.
Yep, just your standard
regular
little
old
dice.
D6.
Yep, 6-sided dice.
when it
Probably
comes to
the most
kind of dice
well-used
I have.
one after the D20.
When it comes to the D20, the DM behind the scenes has
Mhm.
the numbers for success. So like in Phil's, he's talking about that lock. Maybe that lock has a 15 to beat. So if you're not good at if you're not good at picking locks, then there's a 75% chance of failure. But if you're a rogue and you've got like +5, then you need to roll a 10 or better, which is a 50% chance of succeeding or failing.
Okay. And real quick, because we haven't really heard anything from you, Jordan.
Uh-huh.
You were talking just before the we were recording everything. You were talking about a game that you had your character sheet in front of you, and you were talking about your stats, and
Yes.
you were explaining to me, and if I could be 100% honest with you, I was quite focused on a couple of other things. So if you wanted to try and re-explain the stats and the addition numbers as well.
Yeah, so my character. Yeah, so for like my character, the Bob the Small, great character, don't question it. So his strength, he has like 11, but then it's got a 0. So if I needed to roll, and I didn't get anything, I wouldn't get any plus from my stats because he's a 0. So, but when it comes to like intelligence, I've got a +2. So if I rolled say 11, I would get then an extra 2 on it. Like my wisdom +2, charisma +1. So it's basically stuff that helps you out, stuff that's got to do with your character that will give you like a boost in the situation. So where someone else may fail, you have your character has that special stat that gives him the edge or whatever, the upper hand. That might be the
Say
difference
I roll this
between
dice,
fail.
and I got a 3. Okay, I
Yeah.
would add for the wisdom. I would add. You said 2. I would add 2 to
Yeah.
that, so I'd have a 5.
Yes.
Whereas if I had rolled a 6, I would get an 8.
Yes.
A number that's theoretically higher than what I could get possibly on the 6-sided dice.
Also, if you're bad, you can get negatives.
You can.
Yes, you can definitely get negative.
If your
Look,
character
here.
is very
That gets
stupid,
entertaining.
If your character is very stupid, like you rolled a barbarian and you had a really bad roll when you're making your character, you're like, okay, I'll put it into intelligence. He's an idiot. You can have up to -5 intelligence if you have 0 intelligence, which is, I don't think, possible because the minimum is 3.
It is possible, but at that point you're in a coma
True. And
Yeah,
then
they
if you
don't-
need to
because your
roll-
intelligence is less than an animal.
Yeah, they never really
Those-
brought the minuses into ours. I think they were keeping it simple because there was me and another person that had never played D&D before, so they just kept it as like, oh, it's either 0 or plus, whatever. They never brought
Yeah.
minuses into it.
your basic
Yeah, the
stats,
negatives get fun because there's a lot of people who deliberately set a stat for negative, so they have extra points to put towards something else, and then roleplay gets really fun. Like an example for me in my Thursday group, my character has a low wisdom stat. She has the lowest wisdom of the entire party, so her common sense values are kind of screwed up. She just doesn't get it.
That's 7.
But I think she started at a 7. Yes, as we've advanced the campaign.
I mean,
I've
the
advanced the
character needs
stat.
7.
No,
dog.
that's a different character. That's the murder hobo of the group, who's also kind of a cannibal. Yep. So yeah, you could play most anything.
and your
But my character is notorious for not being able to notice things because her perception checks to perceive things are in the negative.
Yeah, your basic stats, your strength, your dexterity, your constitution, your intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. That's your basic stats, but your bonuses and negatives to those apply to all of your skills. So if you're very strong, you're going to have better ability to do, not acrobatic, what's the other one? Starts with an A.
Athletics.
Athletics. If you have a high dexterity, you're going to be better at hiding. You're going to be better at acrobatics, and etc.
Dodging things.
True.
Okay.
Constitution, you're literally tougher. So your ability to resist things like poison or take more damage is higher. Intelligence, those are the example of the people with the high IQ. They are super smart.
Yeah, like there was one.
Wisdom.
There was one I was trying to explain to dude, but I wasn't too sure about to be able to explain it properly. Like you can obviously put your strength or dexterity, wisdom, blah 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 into saving throws. I was trying to explain to him what a saving throw was, but I couldn't remember.
It's your
enough
ability
to-
to resist something.
Yeah,
Like
I was,
you get poisoned. Your ability to resist the poison.
yeah,
You get sick. All right, you got to fight off the disease now. That's a saving throw.
yeah.
It's
Because I was
your
trying
ability
to.
to resist things.
Yeah, because the way I was trying to explain it was, well, my character, his saving throws are in dexterity and intelligence. So it's like, well, if it came to surviving, when it came to like, if I could outsmart something to survive, like that's where my character would get an advantage. That's how I was trying to explain it. I was like, I don't
So
actually
your
know if that's correct.
stats,
Yeah,
they can have
Someone-
bonuses, buffs, debuffs. You can roll to show resistance or defense against different kinds of attacks and status ailments and things like that.
Someone
Yes.
hits you
Think
across
about
the head with a frying
reality, dude.
pan. Save and throw to see if you stay conscious.
Yep. Or you can actually, the stats originate from basically putting real life into numbers. Like you have the super highly intelligent people. That's a high intelligence. The people who have the brains, but they don't have the common sense. Well, apparently they have a very low wisdom. Or the people who are very charismatic and can get people going. Or the people who have a hard time holding a conversation because they're
Group leader types.
there's your charisma. You're very nimble, quick on your feet, dexterity. Very tough, and somebody could punch you, and you're just like, did you really just do that? Constitution. Strength. You're the guy who, like, oh, hey, you need to get out the way. Pick somebody up and literally move the whole person with one hand if you've got a really high strength. Or the guy who can barely lift his backpack if you've got the really low strength.
So I guess we have a pretty good handle on like the workings of like individual what for and how to. Where the dice rolls are concerned, the rules the way your turn works, what the dice are for, what they can mean, your stats and things like that, and abilities. Now let's move to what Chris had mentioned earlier, and you've all made mention of at some point, the different versions of the game. So, as with anything, of course, you would assume that it would change over time. It would either grow to encompass more kinds of things, or you would take out things that aren't working anymore. You would redo something that wasn't quite right. So how does it change? What are the changes? Why?
I think
Oh, there's a lot.
let's start with, I think Redneck might agree with this, THACO.
Actually, you can go back before THACO if you wanted.
I don't
THACO
know
was
much
an
before
AD&D
that.
thing. OD&D THACO didn't exist.
Yeah, there's a stat called THACO, which stands for 2-hit armor class 0, which just involved a bunch more math than necessary.
It was an attempt to streamline a process that didn't have any real planning. The original methods for combat, when it first came out, were rather haphazard because they were literally half the time making it up as they went along and just creating it. THACO came out as a way to streamline it. The problem with THACO and a lot of the addition is, for a lot of things you need to roll high, except on other things when you have to roll low. And how it's calculated changed depending on what you were doing.
So it's just semantics and rules and hard to memorize. And
It was
you'd
very
roll really high and be
complicated.
excited, and then, oh no.
It's like, yeah, I'm gonna roll to do this thing. All right, it's a strength check, so I need to roll high. No, actually, you need to roll low.
Sorry, I guess I somehow
Muted yourself?
muted myself.
Good job.
So
So yeah, older editions were much, much more complicated. Both the rules, how things worked, the number systems. As it advanced in years and editions, it got much more streamlined. In the oldest versions, you didn't have starting skills of like, oh, you have acrobatics, athletics, here's how well you can do. You had to acquire your skills. Kind of like in a lot of video games of like, oh, I've learned how to do this now. I have this skill in doing this thing. You literally had to acquire your skills. Otherwise, you didn't have any of it. Later on, it became, you have it, it's just determine how good you are at it. And as you advance in levels, you can become better and better at certain things, or you can just maintain the same level. And same with all the number generation and calculations. The most recent edition, they've gotten rid of most of the number crunching. So instead of going with, okay, I get a bonus from this, I get a bonus from that, I get a bonus from this, I get a bonus from that, this guy's giving me a bonus because he's using magic on me, they removed most of that to simplify it as much as possible.
Yeah,
both
both.
versions have changed things like number systems and math for attacks and defense and initiative. Skills used to be
very complex.
You would need
Very
to
complex.
acquire them, where now you can ascribe them to yourself, and you have to then determine how good you are at using that skill, and you can improve your overall skill over time.
Kind of like in real life. You start off with, everybody can do basic stuff like around a house. But you can't not everybody can redo the plumbing for their sink. And some that do can do it a lot faster than others because they have put a lot of work into learning how to do this. Example.
General rule of thumb is the more recent the version, the less overwhelming the dice rolls, the math, and the numbers are, but it's still a lot to take in. Like Pathfinder came out, which is a new version of D&D, and it's a lot simpler in a lot of aspects, but it's still not something you're going to learn overnight.
None of it you'll learn overnight. It takes time.
So for someone like my wife, who has never play D&D but has an interest in it because it's fantasy based and it's something that she could get into. She's heard of, and I've heard of, people using, and Redneck has even mentioned it a couple times.
Yeah, I've
he's
gotta get
got
some
a world in
resources
Final
for.
Fantasy. You're using a Final Fantasy world. Well,
Yep.
she would like to get into it for like Harry Potter type
It exists.
D&D play, because she's heavy into Harry Potter. And you can look up there and see, other than my daughter's Pokemon stuff, my wife's got a whole bunch of Harry Potter wands and parts you can't see over there. Other Harry Potter paraphernalia, like a big
Yep.
old giant cup.
It exists.
But she would want to get into it for that kind of reason. So for somebody like her who has in her mind a purpose and a style that she wants to play for, but has no clue how to do it, what kind of things should she grab a hold of first to be able to like get the idea of how it works, what to do, where to go? Because I assume once she gets into the play, she already knows enough about the world of Harry Potter to know the basic ins and out of what to do once you get there. But how does she get there?
I would say
What
whoever
kind of
knows,
version of the game would she look for, and all that kind of stuff?
whoever knows the most about Harry Potter should be the DM in that. So I would recommend she be the DM versus be a player. But there's a lot more to know in order to be that person, to play that role.
Okay.
Yeah. I would have 2 recommendations for that. For someone like her, if you're wanting to learn D&D, I would say start with the newest edition. It's currently the simplest and easiest to learn.
Which is,
The other option would be to not learn D&D at all and go look at the Harry Potter roleplay systems, because there are some. They do
Okay.
exist. So you could just find a Harry Potter game system of whether it's a D20 based game system like Dungeons and Dragons is, or something else. You can look into those. A lot of tabletop role playing games have the same basic stuff of stats, skills, abilities, paper, dice. They just vary on how they do it.
I have 2 recommendations for how she would get into it, into knowing how to do it. One of them is watch someone else play D&D or Pathfinder or anything. Just watch the experience happen. So you get to see how combat works, you get to see how roleplay works, and watch more than one party. Like there's a couple of very popular people on YouTube that you can watch that have been well established and do things well. But watch others, there's different play styles, there's different DMs. The second recommendation, I have a brain fart for, I'm sorry.
But the second I would say would probably be like find like one-shot games or stuff run by the game stores that are already pre-built, pre-generated. You don't have to go through the process of learning how to make a character because it's already made, and they can work through it with you for the basic rules, and you can just play that way. I know Wizards of the Coast has what they call Adventure League, where you can go to like game stores on certain days of the week and actually play the games and learn how to play them. And all the league games are all run the same way, the same content. So you could play a game in one city, go to the next city and next week, and continue. I believe Pathfinder has the same system option, I believe. Or something close to that. I don't play as much Pathfinder, so I don't remember.
Okay.
I really like the Might and Magic series, like Might and Magic 6, 7, and 8. And I have hosted a campaign that was just verbatim Might and Magic 6 because I know the world, I know the quests, and I added potions that don't exist in the world, I added combat tactics that don't exist in the world, so you don't have to play anything by the book. You just need
No.
to find a DM who knows Harry Potter and the world and the spells, and preferably the monsters. Oh yeah, my second recommendation was whoever's the DM has to have some information in the background, like monster stats. How much health do they have? What can they do? How much damage do they deal? As long as you have all that stuff prepared, what can they run into? How do we solve the issue? Then you'll be fine.
Okay. Sorry, my Logitech capture is absolutely going apeshit over here.
Uh-oh.
Fix
And
what
I
ain't
don't
broke,
know
man.
exactly what's going on with it. Like right now, it's splitting my screen.
Maybe we've got double the dude.
Double the dude.
Double the dude.
It's too much.
Don't understand why it's doing all of this. Just out of the blue, deciding to mess with me while I'm typing. But anyway, okay, so for somebody looking like my wife, somebody who's looking for something very specific out of it, there is a very particular way they would need to go about it. Yeah.
If you're wanting explicitly something done in the Harry Potter style, you're going to have to look for games done that way because it's a very
Or make
narrow
one
focus. Or make one yourself. Starting off, that's harder to do. Not impossible, just harder. If you're going to start it yourself, one of the things I highly recommend is find a lot of pre-made content. And then either use that or modify it to how you prefer it. It takes a lot of the workload off of you so you're not having to create the world or create the story and the quests and the jobs yourself. Instead, you can take pre-built content and use that, maybe modify it to what you prefer. That's actually how I started DMing for the first time. I was running pre-built adventures. It was actually through the Wizards of the Coast Adventure League, but at the time it was called Encounters. I just volunteered to start running those. And it was, you would show up, here's your little bitty module for the night. It's enough to run 2 hours worth. You spent a little bit studying and learning it, then you sat down with your people and was like, all right, here's what we're doing tonight. And you could run those. Sometimes they last a few hours. Sometimes they can last a few sessions. Depends on how focused your group is or isn't. It's very common for people to get distracted.
Group
Right.
focus is a big thing.
Like I'm having right now.
I'm just focused on dude's fucking camera now.
I can't I don't understand because the hotkeys, I have to be holding Alt for the hotkeys to be working. But for some reason, it's as if something or some has a hold on Alt, and as I'm typing, it's just going fucking insane. But
Yes, it is.
Costin hacked your stuff.
Yeah, so he's the one holding down alt.
Yeah, right. But yeah, to get us
Let's
back
see
to
if that
topic,
fixed
which
it.
is an issue
right,
you will find happens a lot with D&D. People get derailed, side conversations. You'll get discussions about things without progressing the story.
You'll get
Same
people
problem
who
we're
are
having with the
hungry.
podcast.
Oh yeah, our D&D session, I've only done one, but saying our session was probably like, I want to say 4 hours long, but we only did probably like half an hour to an hour's for an actual story because we just kept getting like sidetracked, derailed. You know, this would come up, that would come up, this would get questioned, that would get questioned. Like literally,
See, that's
all
something
the...
that I've always seen the memes on too. Like it's always like a dungeon master has a story or something, and then it's like the players are like, "Oh, that's a nice story you have there. Mind if we absolutely fuck it up?"
I mean, to be fair,
Yes.
saying, to be
is the
fair, that was literally the case because saying the D&D session I did it was with my colleague and his boyfriend, and he literally said that he went out his way just to annoy his boyfriend who was DMing as much as possible just because he gets a kick out of it. Like,
Yeah.
literally like 10 minutes in, he was like, if I'm gonna survive this, I need a fucking drink. And this was at like 3 p.m. Like this was like early for them to start drinking.
Oh, one of
Partaking.
the
It was
games I was in,
hilarious.
the DM was always drinking. It got really funny when he cleared a whole bottle of wine for a session, because then he was drunk doing it. And we all had even more fun.
Yeah, like the only battle that we had in the entire thing was it was a ghost of just an old guy, because my colleague was so determined that he wanted to just keep this guy as a pet. Like this guy was just supposed to be like just a little NPC character that we interact with, and then he goes away. We never see him again. But then he was just like, no, I'm keeping him. So like he like rolled for him to like to join the team or something, and he got the team. So then the DM is saying he got pissed off too. He was like, okay, in your sleep you fuck him to death, and now he's come back to revenge. Fight him. So that was our only battle.
The DM gets tired of the group shenanigans.
Yeah,
When
he
I
did.
DM, I give 1 time a day. And are you sure about that?
Yes.
That's it. That's one. One person gets it 1 time a day tops. Else, you reap the consequences of whatever stupid shit you do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's the running. There's a lot of running jokes with it, and I want to derail from this a little bit because we do have kind of a time limit. Some quick do's and don'ts of D&D gaming, whether it's D&D itself or another edition. One, in my opinion, and this is a big one, understand separation of character and person. Just because something bad happens to the character, and whether it's random shenanigans or like your buddy is short on money, so he pickpockets you to have the money, don't take it personally. It's a game, guys. Don't get so obsessed because it's not attacking you personally.
Don't get too
Game.
invested.
Oh yeah, because my
Yes.
character, I killed 2 of my friends in our D&D game, and that was in that first battle, just because my character was the sort of person that's like, if you get in the way and you die, you die. I don't care. The weak dies and the strong prevails. They didn't take it seriously. They didn't take it, to heart.
But
Yeah,
there
my-
are people who take it personally and just don't.
And my current character is a Shuni, which is like a humanized pug. And on the very first day, I got my gold stolen by somebody who's playing a cat, who's essentially he's role playing Puss in Boots. So my character now
That's
has
hilarious.
a permanent grudge against this cat, and will do anything he can to fuck up his life. But my friend is playing the cat, and he knows that it's all in fun.
Yeah.
All right. So let me try and wrap this up here. Okay. Kind of like a synopsis here. Basically, what we've gone over here is getting started in D&D, learning about the game itself and how to get started, and all these different things that the parts are all about, what they mean, if there's any point of confusion, all these kind of things. Basically, you have set rules. Players got to follow these rules, but they're free to make the story flow however they see fit. They use their imagination to make the story. There's an outline, and you fill in the parts between the start and the quest or the main story plot line, and the players fill it in with their imagination and the way they interact. There's multiple phases to each person's turn, and during their turn, you may roll dice to determine actions, outcomes of the actions. There's multiple dice that can be used. D20s, probably one of the most common, if not the most common known amongst people who know little to nothing about Dungeons and Dragons. Smaller dice like the D4 and the D6 are used more for determining damage and damage outcome, resistance, expounding like poison or fire damage or things like
also
that.
D8, the D10, D12. D12 being the least used.
Okay, and then the D20 used for utility actions and like healing your team, lockpicking and such, and things like that. Stats can have bonuses, buffs, debuffs, and things like that. And saving throws are there usually to resist or things like that. Moving on from that, there's different versions of the game, and the versions have changed, like the number systems, the math for attacks and defense and initiative. Skills used to be where you'd have to acquire the skill through playing the game. Now it's more of a, you can ascribe the skill to yourself, and you learn how to use it better and better over time as you get more points and such. The newest version of D&D is version 5. Getting started needs to be well planned, or if you're wanting to start in a specific world or version or whatever, you need to do so by either finding a well-established game or group in that world, or start one yourself. Correct? All that seem good to you? Okay. All right. Well, guys, thank you for listening, watching, or both. This is TekTox Podcast, and we are grateful for everything that you are doing for us, liking, subscribing, all that kind of silly stuff, following, whatever you do. But do be sure to check us out on really anywhere podcasts are found. We do have a YouTube channel that is just TekTox, and then we have our Twitch channel, which is TekTox_podcast. You can find us there. And if there's nothing else from you guys, I guess that's it. Bye, guys.